very excellent self-directed learners because they're getting the training themselves. They really say it best. The other key thing that many of them noted was how little they tend to use each other in terms of, say, a community of practice. That what they really would like to do is to get together with other teachers and share their expertise and share the problems and have some help with figuring it out and problem solving. And that doesn't happen often enough, again, related to the time element to do that. And then all of the teachers could cite resources that they thought would really support their teaching and make for better programs and better outcomes. There was probably a 50-50 split between the teachers who really felt like they wanted very clear assessments done so that they could get a diagnosis for their students, so that it would provide some structure to their teaching. I think many of the newer teachers seem to feel that way more than the more experienced teachers. And I don't know if that's a function of, that level of structure helps me to know what to do, because there was so much of the I'm just not sure what to do, that even a diagnostic label would be useful if it drove me in a particular direction about where to go. And then again, the differentiation is a very clear theme for some people, and some could say, I think special ed would be key, either to have teachers who have a special ed background or to have a special ed teacher in our program, as K-12 does. Everyone noted the difference, the discrepancy between the resources available in K-12 and ABE. So in taking the findings through this interpretation phase, this is where I started to notice again myself sort of going to the place of this OT practice model that I'm very familiar with. This is sort of what I use in my OT practice, where we've got a person, an environment, and occupation, or if you think of that as just the activity that a person is trying to do. In a transactive relationship where all of those things need to be in balance so that this very middle section represents a successful task or an effective job done, or you've finished what you needed to do when all of those things are in balance. As I went through the findings, I could hear the ABE teachers actually talking in some of those same terms. Like they were talking about relationships with their students and their years of experience, and the things that sort of to me started to represent, well, there's this people aspect of this teaching practice that they're very clearly talking about. The environment I saw is both sort of the macro ABE system and then their own programs in terms of how much that impacted what they could do in the classroom. And then the occupation, or the sort of the academic tasks in the classroom, they all could list methods and techniques that they used and very concrete things that they did in the classroom. The whole point of this is I started to see ways in which I wasn't so off about why does ABE keep provoking me? Like I feel like I've been there. I feel like I know this. Because I think there's a lot about our practices that are very similar in terms of trying to find this sweet spot match for people. Like, can we just help people get to something the way they need to do it so they can have some success with it? So there's a way in which the sort of back half of my dissertation is framed up around not explicitly connecting this model of practice to ABE, but just acknowledging that we are fairly closely aligned in a way that I thought was probably going to be true. Oh, here's more texty. So conclusions from this. I'm back to when you ask somebody to describe something, you need to be ready to receive what they describe. And so the first conclusion was there's not a singular way that people talked about what they did. It was very complex and actually a little hard to capture in one full paper, but very, very complex practice that these teachers are doing. And then to practice effectively, it was very clear how much teachers need a very high level of interpersonal skill, and they need content knowledge. I think this can go to some of the places about recruitment for ABE teachers as the field starts to really pay more attention to professionalizing, which is just on the brink of doing right now. This could be something to pay attention to, is who really, I think right now it's a self-selected population, because the people who stay there tend to be the people who are very much about relationship and interpersonal skills. And I think people who aren't tend to walk from the field. Again, like-minded practice models of adult basic ed and OT, and where I've come from my original assumption about how I knew how I was going to get OTs scheduled into ABE next week, and I knew what they were going to do. Now I'm more at the point of there's a role, there's probably a role. We need to do more research. I need to do more research to figure out what might that look like. And again, regardless of their years of experience, because this was from the least experienced to the most experienced teachers, they still talk about feeling really underprepared to deal with the level of complexity of their student population. So there's still work to be done around figuring this out. And I know there's very active research going on now, specifically around adult learning disabilities, but we need to get that to connect with the adult basic ed system in a better way than it has yet. The field, and again, the field is at the brink of trying to really become a professional field, and I think what they'd like to eventually see is teaching programs where when undergrad students are coming in and selecting the specialization they want to do, I want to be a special ed teacher, I want to teach K to 5, social studies, that on that list is adult basic ed teacher. That's a place that it's never been before, and so there's something to sort of hold out for the future. And that to mobilize that, if we have the current teachers feeling like a more professional person, like what they do really requires a level of expertise, and we're pulling them out of this sort of feeling of being a marginalized teacher of marginalized students, that helps the field in the end. That moves the field. That gains some energy for that effort. Teachers clearly felt they didn't always have the expertise to meet their students' needs. That was another conclusion. And that engaging the teachers in these processes of program evaluation and development is key. I was unbelievably struck by all the wisdom in the classrooms. When you go and ask people about what they do, they'll tell you. And almost all of the recommendations either came from or were highly informed by the teachers themselves. They gave me a list as long as my arm. When you write this up, could you put these, recommend this, say this. They're all about it. So they need to be seen as the primary stakeholders in the profession. A lot of this is about the field funding things. This is a huge problem in ABE as it is everywhere else right now. Where is the money? Who has the money? But there needs to be some more problem solving about the money. We need to get, and some of that relies on the field becoming a professional field. I think there's that piece too. There are probably some models of that K-12 is using with some success that might have application for ABE, but again, there's more research projects for future cohorts. The teachers themselves, really here the key thing I think is to explore some mentorship models, because one of the most striking things was talking to the very brand new teachers. Several of them were scared to death. Judith's favorite quote, and I didn't put it in here, but was the youngest teacher said, I sometimes feel like I'm an animal let loose in a cage and I just don't know how to get out. I don't know what to do. And yet, she wasn't trying to get out of, she kept showing up to teach. She kept doing it. She just wanted somebody to mentor her, to tell her, to help her figure things out, and there was no one. She was the only one in the program. So there needs to be some attention paid to that exchange. Communities of practice would be key, and then teachers, accessing more and different varieties of professional development. There's a lot more available now, web-based and virtual things. Further research, I would think another study like this one, but that corrects for all the limitations of this one. So a larger sample, more men, more part-time teachers, other areas of the U.S. It would be interesting to get sort of a wave across the U.S. of studies like this to get more views on this and to see, is this particular to how Maine runs ABE, or does this happen in other places too? And this is my absolute favorite. If I could find a place to do this, I'd start tomorrow. I would love to do some action research that really gets some of these other providers into ABE classrooms to test it. Does this work? Does this not? How could this possibly make a difference, or does it? And this is really just a joke for the end, that early on in the in our cohort group, we talked about who would have the longest dissertation, who would have the shortest, who could write a haiku, who could put their whole dissertation in a haiku, and if we all thought if anybody could do it, I probably could. So I figured I'd give it a try and close with the dissertation haiku. And there would be that. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions? Or not? I'm meant to do this. Oh, right. Okay.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I was struck that you, as the first graduate of the adult learning program, are taking on the work that the faculty member who dreamed of doing this, never able to, Luke Baldwin, but he came 25 years ago and was working with adult students in the Adult Baccalaureate program, and students particularly who had learning disabilities was doing whatever worked and looking at different strategies. And he had a dream that someday we would have a doctoral program to train the next generation of teachers in the philosophy that he carried. So I'm sure he's smiling up from heaven down that you're the person carrying this out.
Here. Thank you. That's lovely to hear.
This was terrific, Susan. I really enjoyed it. I really resonated with the system factors that you were talking about. Been doing a lot of professional development with adult educators, and what we find is that we can go in and do 6 days of really top-notch training, but if the system doesn't change in a way that allows them to use it, and some of the things that you were talking about, I imagine you ran into problems with managed enrollment, where there were different students in the room every night, so it's very difficult to plan for that. Classes that aren't leveled, and so they could have people ranging from 1st to 8th grade in their classes. So I was wondering if you could speak to some of those.
There are two things that you're talking about that makes me think of. The first one is that I thought one of the most ironic things was when I asked, now by definition, the people in my study had been in the training I did about adult learning disabilities. So then when I asked, we talked more about professional development, all 10 of them said, we need training about adult learning disabilities. And I'm like, really? Really? That's funny because I did that. And, but, you know, I've talked with the committee about the fact that, you know, you can't go drop some knowledge one day and expect that people retain it, they take it back to the classroom, or that it has that kind of meaning for them in that moment. So there does need to be a different structure around how that's done. Some of the current work on professional development that I've seen, and that's like this year current, is looking at sort of embedding experts, if you will, in programs for a while, looking at job-embedded models of professional development, looking at really other ways than these face-to-face one-day workshops that have just become the norm, and so that's what we do. So there's a lot of activity right now, and if you email me, I'll send you my full reference list or something like that, because I found a lot. And here's the second thing. That was part of the trouble of you step a toe into this water with teachers and they start talking about it. I felt like my dissertation was starting to turn the corner into the system issues, because they're huge, and it's a crotchety system, and it's complex. And it did seem to grow up as a system of more of a social justice sort of system of education. Like, oh, people need to learn math, they need to learn to read. Let's do classes, and you know, it was all very well thought out in that respect.